Hi, what's up guys? In this tutorial, I wanted to share with you how to create a small Laravel project by using ChatGPT. Let's see if we are able to create a whole application by using ChatGPT. Okay, see you soon. All right, here we are in a folder from the command line. Let's create a Laravel project. And we're gonna use Composer. So Composer, create project, Laravel, and we're gonna call it gallery. Okay, our script has finished, and here we have the project. You can see gallery. Let me go inside that folder so that we have the project from that folder. Let's execute PHP artisan sail install so that we have access to the Docker Compose file. And I'm going to activate number 2, MariaDB, so that we have access to the database that we're pulling the image. I have Docker Desktop installing, up and running. I have some videos on how to install Docker Desktop in Windows, Mac, and Linux. You can check out those tutorials also. Okay, we have already the image downloaded, and now let's execute PHP sail publish so that we have access to the Docker folder in our project. You can see here. Then now we're going to have the Docker folder here. And you can see that we have the different configuration for PHP 8, 8.1, 8.2, etc. Here we have the Docker Compose file, and you can see that we're going to use PHP 8.2, and then we can also map, for example, the app port. If we have port 80 already in use, we can define this environment variable here, and I'm going to set it to port 8000. As for MariaDB, I'm going to forward the port to port 3307. Okay, you can also execute PHP artisan serve if you want to have your project up and running with what you have installed in your PC, or if you don't have Docker installed. Okay, now I'm gonna execute vendor bin sail up and then -d so that it goes into detached mode. Okay, let's verify that the application is up and running. And you can see that we have here our Laravel application up and running. And in order to verify if the database is working, we can just execute sail artisan migrate. Okay, you can see that the migrations were executed. And if we connect to the database by creating a new data source here in phpstorm, let's call it Laravel gallery. Port is 3601. That's the forwarding port that we set in the .m file. The user is going to be, let's take a look if these are the credentials or not. Yes, the user is sail and the password is password. You can change that information here in the .m file if you want to. You can see db username, sail, db password, password. Okay, now You can see here that we have the Laravel database, we have tables, failed jobs, migrations, password resets, personal access tokens, and the default user table. Okay, we're ready to go. Let's take a look at now at ChatGPT and let's see if we can get any help for creating this project from ChatGPT. So I already have this example because sometimes ChatGPT is not working because there are too many connections. And this is the question that I asked. Could you please provide a Laravel code to expose user categories, albums, and photos as API? Albums has one-to-many relation to categories, photos belong to album, and album belongs to user. Okay, here is the example. You can see that it created the routes. Okay, it's not using the latest specification for Laravel for creating the routes. For example, here's the controller name and the index action in the old way, instead of passing an array with a class name and the method. But let's give it a try. So we gotta copy this code into api.php. Let's first just verify that the code works, and then we're gonna refactor it with the latest Laravel's specification. So I'm going to open routes API, and I'm gonna copy these routes here. So we're gonna have in get, the example is just for get requests for users, categories, albums, photos, and then the detail of a photo. Okay, let's go back and let's grab the rest of the code. You can see here that the user controller was defined, so we gotta create this file, and you can see the namespace is app HTTP controller, so we gotta create this file inside the controllers folder, HTTP controller, user controller, and let's paste the code. So you can see here that it's using the user default model that comes with Laravel, and it's returning all of the records. That's okay, it should work. Let's list the routes that we have defined with PHP Artisan route list. In this case, I'm inside sail, so that's why I have to prefix the execution of this command with vendor bin sail artisan and then the rest of the command. Okay, I gotta remove this comment here, and let's execute the command again. So we have this that user control does not exist, so we gotta import here user controller, or we can do it, let's import user controller, and let's change here the way Laravel now manages the routes. So you have user controller, the class, we pass an array, and then the method. It could work like this the old way, but we have to go to the default and import the HTTP controller's namespace so that it works. Okay, let's refactor the rest of the code. Okay, and now it works. You can see that we can call the API/user. Okay, in order to have the list of users, we still don't have a user controller to match that request, but we do have it for the API users. You can see that we have user controller and then the index action. Okay, let's open this REST console that I have here from phpstorm, and let's execute a GET request to this endpoint. So we're gonna have here the HTTP localhost port 8000, and the route is gonna be API/users. So you can see the response here. We have headers, and we don't have anything in the body. Why? Because we don't have any records yet. Okay, you can see here, if we open the same request from the browser, that we have an empty array. Why? Because we don't have any users yet. We can activate the seeders here. If we go to the database folder, seeders, we can remove this comment and create 10 users. you can see here that we have the factories user factory, and you can see that we use PHP Faker in order to create these users. So let's go to the terminal again. Let's go back to the console and let's execute artisan db semicolon seed. Okay, let's verify if we have any users in the database. Okay, we have users. Let's execute the request again from the REST console. Okay, you can see here the response. We should remove the HTTP because we already have the HTTP here. And you can see the response. We have a list of users. So it means that at least this first request worked. The code that it generated works, even though it's not up to date with the latest Laravel version, because this AI was trained a couple of years ago. But we have a useful code. The code is running. I mean, the user controller is working. Also, the routes are working. Let's go ahead and let's create the other files and let's analyze the code that it generated. So you can see here that it did the same thing for the category controller. So we're going to go and have the same output. But of course, we have to create also a seeder for the category table. Also for the album controllers, you can see here that it's going to return also the albums list, but also you can see here, because I told him that an album belongs to a category, with the category embedded with the with command. As for the photo controller, you can see the same thing. We receive an album ID, and then it's going to return all the photos bound to that album. And here you can see the model, very basic. The user model that we already have in a Laravel out-of-the-box application. We also have the category model here, and also the album model. And also you can verify here that it creates also the dependency. You can see that we have a method called album that returns belongs to album. Okay, we have the relationship between an album and a photo. Then after that, I realized that I didn't tell him anything about creating migration files or creating anything. And you can see here that it responded with this file. Create category table. And here is the migration, but you can see that in Laravel 9, we return here an anonymous class. And here we have a named class, but it works right nonetheless. The same goes for albums table. You can see here, this is the definition that I told him about category ID. And you can see that I also told him this description. So you gotta be very descriptive if you wanna have an output that satisfies your request. For example, I told him that categories should have ID, title, and description, user ID, and the user ID is a foreign key. You can see also that I typed pretty fast and some words are misspelled, and nonetheless, it understood everything that I told. For example, also, the photo should have an ID, title, category ID, image path, description, and the category ID is a foreign key to categories table. And you can see here, we have the category table with ID, title, description, user ID. You can see set as a foreign key here, and there references the users table. The same goes for albums table migration. You can see here that we have the category ID as a foreign key, and photo, the same thing, title, album ID as a foreign key, image path, and description. And it even gave me this command that I could have created the same thing by executing make migration, and then the name of the migration, of course, it should have added also here the model class. Now I'm gonna copy all these files, and then we're gonna give it a try and see if everything is working. Okay, I created the photo model, category model, album model, and also the controllers for album, and you can see here, category, and they're gonna work, but we still don't have any data for those REST endpoints. You can verify from here that if I change the request to categories, I'm receiving the user response because here in the router, I made a mistake, and here we have to set the category controller. Okay, make sure to import also the class. Let's do the same here for album and here for photo. Okay, here we have photo, category, and album controller is already imported. Let's verify now that we're receiving categories, or an empty array in this case, because we don't have any. And of course, we have an error, base table not found. Why? Because we don't have the database table yet created. For that purpose, we're going to use ChatGPT because it already created the migrations. It even gave us the command in order to create the migrations. We have to create it so that we have the file's timestamp, and then we can paste the code inside. So let's copy the command, and let's first create the migration for categories. And here we're going to pass the parameter create and then the name of the tables, and we're going to say categories. So if we go to database migrations, you can see here that we have the categories migration. Let's take a look. And you can see that we have the app schema create to create the categories table, and we have the ID and the stamp. Of course, you can see here that we return an anonymous class. That's the way to go now with Laravel. And what we can do here is just copy the app code. Of course, if we had copied all of the code and pasted it in here, it would have worked in the same way, but let's just override this method here. So as you can see, we didn't have to type everything in order to create these migrations because it was already created by ChatGPT. Let's do the same thing also for this one. Here is for photo. We gotta take the one from categories. That is this piece of code here. Now let's create also the migration for photos, and the tables gotta be photos. And let's grab the code and let's copy the up method here. Next, we have albums. Here we are, and let's take a look. We have album with category ID. There is a foreign key to the categories table. We have category ID here. You can see it as a foreign key. In photos, we have title, album ID as a foreign key to albums table. We also have categories with title, description, and user ID as a foreign key. So let's run this migration and let's see. So PHP artisan migrate. As you can see here, we have an error. Why? Because we're creating the photos migration without creating first the album migration, and then we have a problem of constraint. So we have to run first the albums migration in order to run the photos migration and have the foreign key already ready for this table. So let's fix that. Let's run first the albums migration. One thing we could do is just change here the timestamp by refactoring the code so that it's created before the photos one. Okay, let's give it a try. This time we're gonna execute migrate fresh so that the tables present in the database are dropped, and then we'll run the migration from the start. Okay, now we have the tables. Let's take a look at the database. Let's refresh everything. And you can see here that we have the album table, we have the categories, and we also have the photos table. Perfect. Now, let's verify if we can ask ChatGPT to create the migrations for these tables, the seeders. So I'm going to ask him, could you please also create the seeders for users. A user, we already have the seeder for categories, albums, and photos table. So as you can see, we have some issues with ChatGPT. There are a lot of requests. I'm gonna wait a little bit, maybe go on tonight when there are less requests to ChatGPT and we have a chance to run this request also. All right, guys, ChatGPT is back again. I just loaded the last request, Laravel API code example, and I asked him to please create also the seeders. He remembered that the tables were categories, albums, and photos, and here is the code. Okay, it's a very simple seeder. You can see here that it creates 3 categories as an array. You can see the title, the description, and for each loop, it calls the create method from category model. It does the same thing for albums table seeder, and you can see here that it's going to set an album for every category. So the only thing that it didn't create was the titles, the album's title, maybe because I didn't say that album's title was supposed to be not null. So we have to give more information when we're asking ChatGPT to create code for us. So I should have said, and let's verify if I'm not wrong, that in albums, you can see here that it created the category ID. It didn't add the title, so I forgot to say that it needed a title. We can add it later on. And of course, it just created the category ID because that's the foreign key, and so this is a constraint. Let's take a look now to this code snippet for photos table. And here you can see that we have the title and it's okay. We have the album ID because it's a foreign key. It created also a local image path, and this is the path that it created by default, and the description. And so we're good to go. We also have the commands in order to create the seeders. So let's copy first the creation of the seeders. And you can see here that we have the file album seeders, categories, table seeder, etc. Let's also modify the albums table creation script so that we can add also not only the category ID, but also, like we did here for category, the title. And let's run the migrate fresh. And let's try to correct this seeder and tell ChatGPT that album has to have the column title. So sorry, I made a mistake. albums table should have a title column. Please rerun the seeders creation. Okay, let's grab the one for categories. Here's the one for albums, and you can see that it corrected the script, and now we have the title column. Let's also update this method. And last but not least, let's copy, once that it finishes, the photos one. So I didn't copy the whole file, so I have to import here the category class. The same goes for album and for photo model. Okay, now we can go to database seeder, and here we can call our seeders. We can call the category table seeder. Then let's call also the albums table seeder. And let's call the photos table seeder. Okay, let's run dbseed. Okay, you can see here that for categories, we don't have a user. So we have to, because ChatGPT just froze and we have to reset it. So we have to remind him that the categories table needs a user as a foreign key. So you can see here that we have category table with a user ID foreign key. So let's ask ChatGPT to generate that. Sorry, I forgot to ask you for the user seeder and category seeders has to have user ID as a value, as it is a foreign key from users table. Could you please generate user seeder and regenerate categories seeder. Okay, let's grab the user seeder. As you can see, it doesn't use PHP Faker. We could ask him maybe to generate those data with PHP Faker, but let's give it a try like that, and let's open the user seeder that we don't have it, but we can create it. Let's create the users table seeder. And let's copy the run method from ChatGPT. And we have to import the user table. And let's grab also the category one, because now we have the user ID in the categories array. Okay, let's run the migrate fresh so that we have all the tables cleared. And now let's run the dbseed. And here, let's update this code, and let's call also the user seeder. So that we have the users. That is the first table to create, so that we have the foreign key, we have the categories, then we have albums that depends on categories, and photos that depends on albums table. Okay, let's give it a try. And now let's create the dbseed. Perfect. Now it's working. You can see that every seeder ran. So we can go here to the REST console and now verify if we have any categories. As you can see here that we have nature, animals, cities, and if we try to get some users, we have the users that ChatGPT created for us with the seeder. We can also verify if we have any albums. And you can see here that we have the name, category ID, and we have also the category embedded, because if you remember in the controller, we're returning the records with the with category method. And last, let's give it a try to photos. So we don't have that route. Let's verify if we create it or not. Okay, we don't have it. We have photos and the route is album. So we have to show the photos that belongs to an album. That's the route that we have. So let's correct here and let's change the route here. So I'd prefer to have the route like this, albums. Then the album's ID here, and then photos at the end. Let's give it a try like this. Yeah, it could have worked like it was before, but I prefer to have it that way. Albums, then ID1, and I want to show its photos. And you can see here, we have an image. This is the image. Let's give a try to album 2, and you can see here that we have a record. Let's just verify in the database also. If we go to photos, and we only have 3. We have 1 photo for every album. Okay, guys, you can see that in a very short amount of time, we were able to create a skeleton for our application. We have the controllers. So ChatGPT created the controllers for us. It created models. It created the migrations, the DB seeders. We only had to create the files and tweak some things. So I think this is a nice help for us developers. So ChatGPT is not going to replace us because we got to learn the framework. We got to learn a lot of stuff. We got to be able to ask the right questions if we want the right code to be generated. And of course, this code depends a lot on how this AI was trained, with what information this AI was trained, if it is up to date or not. So that's our mission. We can use it. It's a great help. If it is integrated into our editor, even so much the better. And okay, so don't be afraid. ChatGPT is not gonna replace us or do the whole job for us. See you in our next video. Ciao.